What's up guys, my name's Brian, the owner of Engine Customs and Performance. Today we're going to be installing a Eurocompulsion Front Mount Intercooler system onto a Fiat 124 Spider. Let's get started. So let me show you what all comes with the Eurocompulsion Front Mount Intercooler kit for the Fiat 124 Spider. Check it out. So you're going to have your intercooler core, your 2 hoses, mounting brackets, 4 clamps, hardware kit, and one of the most important things that are included with the kit and all Eurocompulsion products, 2 dum-dums. So let's go over the tools you're going to need to get the job done. Check it out. You're going to need needle nose pliers, 2 longer extensions and 1 shorter extension to go with the 3/8" socket wrench. With that wrench is also going to be a 7, 8, 10, 12, and 13 millimeter socket, 4, 5, and 6 millimeter Allen socket, and a 10 millimeter deep socket, set of cutting pliers, a 1/4 inch socket wrench with a 10, 8, and 7 millimeter deep socket, a swivel socket, and a 14, 10, 8, and 7 millimeter socket. A trim removal tool. Also, a 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 millimeter wrench. A small flathead and a regular flathead screwdriver. You're also going to need window felt, an electric impact, torque wrench, and of course, a larger electric impact to remove the wheels. So the first step is we got to remove the front wheels. Take a 7/8" socket or a 21 millimeter socket to remove the wheels. Okay, now we need to remove the inner liner. And it's secured by a ton of fasteners. So you're gonna see them like this here. There's over 20 of them all the way around this inner liner. So I'm gonna show you how to remove the first one. Just take a small flathead, reach in here and just kind of pop it loose. And then it'll pull out. And then you do the same for the others. All right, so once you've removed all the fasteners, the liner should just come right out. Just set it to the side, and then you're gonna repeat the process on the other side. All right, now that we've got both of those liners out, you're gonna see another lower cover. There's one on each side. Most of the push pins have already been removed, but we've got some underneath. In addition to, you've got some bolts that are going to require an 8 millimeter socket to get them out. So let's do that now. All right, so this is the first bolt. Sometimes you got to use your hands to get them out. You're going to see you've got an additional one here, here, and here. And then of course you've got some more push pins as well. So just remove those and then this cover will come right out. All right, now we need to remove this black plastic cover. You've got 2 8 millimeter bolts here. Then you've got 2 10 millimeter bolts. You've got 2 more push pins and then 2 10 millimeter bolts here. So let's get those removed. And just set that to the side. All right, now I'm gonna remove the front bumper. Now this is completely optional to do this. You don't have to access the stock intercooler to remove it and to install the new one. But we're gonna remove it for 2 reasons. One, it makes things a lot easier to access all of the components with the bumper off. And 2, for filming purposes, you can actually see everything. So we're gonna start with the top. It's secured with a bunch of 10 millimeter bolts and of course more push pins all the way across the top. So I'm gonna start here and work my way around. We'll start with the bolts first. Set those aside, and then work on the push pins. All right, moving on to the side. We got a 10mm bolt right here, and then we've got the fog light. Simply just move the bulb out, and then you've got the connector for the driving light. Pretty easy, just tab, pull out, and then back to this bolt. All right, now on the bottom, you've got a 10mm bolt, 2 push pins, and then a 10mm bolt. So just remove those. Okay, now we're back to the side again for one last thing, and the reason why we waited till the end is because once you remove these 2 nuts, the bumper becomes pretty loose. And then finally, we need to disconnect the washer fluid line. So just be prepared that if your washer fluid reservoir is full, you're gonna lose some washer fluid. So maybe put a little drain pan underneath. So take your 10mm, break it loose, and I just use my fingers to take these nuts off. And get that last one way up top. And then you're gonna see the washer fluid line here. It just connects, loosen that, there's a little tab, pull up, and you're gonna see a little bit of washer fluid come out, and then you're ready to remove the bumper. All right, now just remove the bumper. You're gonna see you've got these tabs here that help line it up. Got those on both sides, so just remove those, slide it out. And then the bumper comes right off, and then just set it off to the side. All right, now we're gonna move to the engine bay. There's a few things we gotta remove, starting with the intake. Now, first thing is you've got this bracket here. Normally, this is secured with a 10mm bolt, but this particular car has a few additional mods like the forged recirculation valve, and the bracket was mounted here. So instead of having that 10mm bolt, now we've got a bolt with a 4mm Allen. So just remember that more than likely you're gonna need a 10mm bolt to remove this. All right, set that out of the way. We're gonna grab the 8mm. So I'm gonna set this aside. This bracket's gonna come loose. And you're gonna see this vehicle has the Eurocompulsion V4 intake. If you have a stock intake, removal is gonna be pretty similar. So I'm gonna start, gotta move this line out. Just kind of wiggle it loose. Then you got another line, just kind of pull it out. Sometimes it can get a little stuck. You got this clamp, takes an 8mm. All right, work that loose. And so you don't lose the clamps, just set those aside, don't leave them on the intake. And you got another one over here. All right. Now you got one more line you've got to disconnect. Just kind of work it loose. Pull that out. Now you can set the first part of the intake aside. And continue on. You got another clamp way down here. Remove the air filter. And then you got one more clamp. And just kind of work that off, and then now you've got the intake completely removed. Now the next step is we need to remove the battery. You've got your 2 terminals here. Got a cover. So these are going to require a 10 millimeter, and then you've got your tie downs, which also have a 10 millimeter nut on them. So let's go ahead and remove those. Set those out of the way. Disconnect the battery. It's always a good idea to start with the negative terminal first. And I just kind of tuck it out of the way so it doesn't touch back on the battery. And same thing here. And just kind of work it off like so. And just lift up on the battery. All right, now that we got the battery out of the car, we need to remove the battery tray. It's going to require a 13 millimeter socket. You got 3 bolts down here. And then you also have some wires here and here. You've just got to kind of pull out, move out of the way. And then we're going to remove the bolts. Get these out. Then the tray should just come right out. All right, now it's time to remove the intercooler hoses. We're going to start with the clamp that secures the hose to the turbo. Now, right now, I can't gain access to this clamp. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to set the coolant reservoir off to the side. So I'm going to take a 10 millimeter socket, take these 2 nuts off, and then I'm going to take some needle nose pliers. You're going to see there's a little tab right here. Just take some needle nose just to push this out of the way. Now, we're not going to disconnect any other hoses. We're just going to lift up. And then if you watch, I can actually set the reservoir all the way here. And now I have access to remove this clamp. All right, now we're going to remove this clamp. Now this is going to use a 10 millimeter socket. And just loosen it. All right, and then just kind of let it fall. Okay, now that we've got the clamp off, I take a flathead and I kind of work it around to break the seal and just kind of push down. And then just take your other hand and just kind of pull on the hose and pull it off the turbo. All right, now towards the bottom, you've got this intercooler hose. We just need to remove this clamp. Take your 10 millimeter. Loosen that. Same thing, take your flathead screwdriver, just kind of help break the seal. And then it should just pop right off after that. All right, now we're gonna remove this hose. Take a flathead, slide it in to this clamp. You're gonna see just kind of pull up on it. It's kind of weird. Just pull up just to release the clamp. And then you should be able to pop it right off. All right, now we need to remove this plastic shield. You've got 2 bolts. It's going to require a 10 millimeter. I use a wrench for this one. Let's get it on there. move that aside. All right, now we need to remove the nuts that secure the front sway bar. The way I do it is I take a 14mm socket and a swivel extension. It's the only way you can actually get this on to the top nut. Once you get it on there, just break it loose. All right, once I got it loose enough, let's get it off with my fingers and set them aside. All right, now we need to remove these two bolts here. Take a 10mm wrench. All right, back up top, there's a bolt. It's way down here. You're gonna take a 10mm wrench to remove the bolt. Kind of tricky to get in there. And it's gonna take you a minute to get it off. So just a quick side note. The reason why we remove these two nuts to the front sway bar is so we can move it forward enough so then we can have enough space to remove the driver's side intercooler hose, which I'm going to do now. All right, now we can remove this intercooler hose. You're going to have to snake it through. Watch for the radiator hose. You may have to kind of move it a little bit just to kind of work this thing through, but it will come out. Here it comes. Like I said, just watch it as it comes through. And we're out. All right, now that we've got the driver's side intercooler hose completely removed, it's time to remove the passenger side intercooler hose. So we're going to start, take a 7mm socket, and we're going to go ahead and remove this clamp. All right, and then just kind of work the hose off of the core. All right, now the other end of that hose, you're going to see this clamp here. Just take a flathead, just kind of work it in, similar to the other ones that we did earlier. Just kind of pull that clamp out. There you go, and take the hose off. All right, now we need to remove this small black plastic shield. It's simply secured with one push pin, so just take your small flathead to remove it. All right, same thing as the other push pins that we removed. And then you're just gonna pull and it'll pop out like that. And set it aside. Next, we need to remove the brake line bracket, which is gonna require a 12mm socket, which is located here. You've got two bolts, one here and then one here. So let's remove those now. All right. These you're probably going to have to use a socket wrench instead of an electric, just because of where they're located. But they come out pretty fast. And then we can remove the bracket out of the way. All right, now back underneath the vehicle, we need to remove the metal splash shield. It's going to just require a 12mm socket, and you got bolts all the way around. I just kind of work my way all the way around to get it off. And set it aside. All right, with the metal tray out of the way, now we need to remove this hose. Take your flathead, you got another retainer clip, and just work that thing off. Just pop it out, and then you should be able to pull that hose off. And just kind of move that off here. All right, next we need to remove this plastic intercooler pipe, which is located right above the rack and pinion. It's secured by two 10mm bolts, which you'll see up here. And they're pretty tricky to get to. So just take a 10mm wrench, put it on the first bolt, and just take your time and break them loose. All right, now that you've removed the two bolts for that plastic intercooler pipe, we need to remove this intercooler hose on the other end. You've got one more retainer clip. You just got to get out. So these are definitely times when you're in really tight spaces, so just work at it to get it out. Using a flathead, of course. All right, now just remove the hose. Now that we've removed that hose from that plastic intercooler pipe, there's one more step we have to get that pipe out. We've got this evap line that's connected all the way down to that pipe, which you can't really see from up top. So instead of trying to disconnect it down below from the pipe, we're actually going to disconnect this line up top and then snake it down. Take a small flathead to push up the clip. So then we can disconnect this hose. Sometimes it takes a minute to get these things out. There we go. And now we're going to snake this thing down, starting from the top, and then we'll work our way down to the bottom. All right, so now you can see that this is very loose, so I can move it around. So I'm going to take my flathead and I'm going to pop this purple tab loose, just like I did the green one. There we go. And then we should be able to separate this hose completely. And now we've got the plastic charge pipe out. All right, now there's another plastic intercooler pipe that we need to remove, and it's the one that's going towards the throttle body. The way you're going to do that is take a couple extensions and then a 12mm socket, and then you can actually reach in there, and you've got, I'm going to use my socket here to point at the bolts. You got one here, and then you have one here. So I'm going to remove both of those. And it really helps if you have an electric impact for this one. And just let it drop. And then go to the next one. And let it drop. All right, now we need to disconnect the boost pressure sensor. Now I removed my glove for this one because you have this tab and you kind of have to do it by feeling. So this yellow tab we got to pull out. So I'm going to use end of my fingernail, pull the tab out, and that allows you to press down to disconnect it from the pipe. All right, now we've removed the connector to the boost pressure sensor, which this is the boost pressure sensor here. All right, now we've got 2 more clamps to remove, and it's kind of difficult to see on camera, but you've got this clamp, which is secured with a 7mm, and then there's one right above it that's secured with a 10mm clamp. So remove these 2 clamps, and then you'll be able to pull this pipe out. All right, after you've completely loosened both of those clamps, this separates into 2 pieces. So that plastic charge pipe comes out, and that's what has the boost pressure sensor attached to it. And then you've got this small coupler that connects to the throttle body, and then that's going to come out as well. All right, since we have this pipe out, we need to go ahead and remove this boost pressure sensor because we're going to transfer that to the EC intercooler hose. So let's go ahead and remove that now and set it to the side. Take a 5mm Allen key or Allen socket to remove it. And then just kind of work it loose, and it should just pop out. Just be careful with it. And there we go. All right, the hard part is finally over. You've got the intercooler hoses removed. All we have left to do now is remove the intercooler core, and it's pretty easy. Take a 12mm wrench. You're going to start over here on the side. And you've got an elbow on each side with 3 nuts. One here, here, and here. And it's the same on the other side. So remove those. Kind of break them loose, and then you can just remove them with your fingers. Now do the same thing on the driver's side. Next, take a 10mm socket with an extension, and you've got 2 bolts to remove. You got one which is here, and then you also have one that's right here. So go ahead and remove them. First, I just loosen them. And then pretty much after that, you can just spin them off. And then do the same thing on the other side. Now we need to remove the horn just to move it out of the way to give us more room. That's a 10mm bolt. Then we have this nut here is a 10mm nut, which is also on the driver's side. And then we have this final 10mm bolt that we have to remove, and then the intercooler core is going to come out. So let's do that now. Got to set that aside. All right, now it's time to remove the core. And it's off. Now it's time to install the new front mount kit. We're going to start by installing the bracket that supports the new intercooler core. Check it out. So we've got the bracket here. You're going to need to grab the 2 nuts, 3 spacers, and 3 bolts. So you may ask yourself, why only 2 nuts, but 3 bolts and 3 spacers? Here's why. This is where the bracket's going to go. As you see this black metal piece here. This hole is not threaded, this one's not threaded, but this one is. That's the reason for the 3 bolts, but only 2 nuts. So we're going to do that now. Okay, so we're going to take the bracket. We're going to start within the center. I've already slid the bolt in. And then you've got the spacer. And it's going to go in the center hole. And once I slide it through, I'm going to take the nut to secure it. And just try to put these in finger tight first. And then we'll tighten them in after we get them all in. There's the first one. I'm going to take the second one. Again, just make them finger tight so it'll stay in place. Then you take your third one, and that's the one that actually threads in. So that's why I recommend doing that one last. And this one you can just kind of get started to where it's just in place. All right, now we need to tighten these down. It's going to take a 10mm wrench to secure on the nut. And then we're going to take a 10mm socket for the bolt to tighten them down. And just do the same for this one. And for this last one, I would just take a socket wrench and your 10mm and do this one by hand since it's going into that threaded welded nut. And then just tighten this one down and then you're good. All right, now we're going to hang the core. You're going to see that there is 2 bolts on top of the core. There's one here and there's one here and there's a washer in there. You want to make sure you loosen those bolts up enough to where you have enough room to hang it. Now you're going to have this horn bracket in here that may get in the way. Just kind of pull it forward a little bit. And then you're just going to want to work it into that slot. There's one. Now we're going to do the same thing for this other one. And then hang it into place. And now we're going to tighten it down. Take a 13mm wrench. We're going to start with the first bolt. Now, there's not a lot of movement here, so just may take a minute or two. Right, and then do the same thing for this one. This one actually came back off. All right. The next step is to install the lower bracket that keeps the intercooler core tight in place. Check it out. So you're going to have your lower bracket itself, and then you're going to have 2 bolts that came with the kit that are tightened using a 6mm Allen socket, 2 washers, and then we're reusing 2 10mm nuts that previously secured the factory intercooler core. So let's put that on now. All right, so we're going to take the bracket. We're going to hang them on these studs. that were used for the factory intercooler core. We're gonna hang that bracket, that way we can let go. We're gonna take those nuts that I was talking about earlier, just kind of put them on there. Just make sure that don't tighten them or anything, but there we go. And then put the other one on, so that way the bracket doesn't come off when you're putting the bolts in the bottom of the core, which I'm gonna show you here in just a second. There we go. So now we're gonna take that 6mm Allen bolt, we're gonna put the washer on it, and then you take the bracket, take one finger, push forward, and then take your thumb and push the intercooler back, and then you should be able to just put the bolt in using your fingers. So we're just gonna kind of put it on finger tight first. There we go. And then we're gonna do the same thing on the other side, bolt and washer. Just kind of line it up. And just make it finger tight first. And now let's get the tools to tighten it down. All right, so I've got my socket wrench, extension, and then 6mm Allen socket. And I'm just going to tighten these bottom bolts first. All right, then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now we're going to tighten these two nuts with a 10mm wrench. All right, 10mm wrench. Tighten it up. And we're tightening the other side. All right, now we need to attach the horn back onto the bracket. So it just kind of hooks in place. And then take your bolt. I took my gloves off for this one, just a little bit easier. Just get it started. And then take your 10mm to tighten it down. Now take a small piece of window felt. It's typically used to seal doors. But I put this behind the bracket where the horn is at, and then the intercooler, it's got some adhesive on it, and then I press it down. It just prevents any metal from rubbing onto the intercooler core. If you've owned a 500 Abarth, you're probably really familiar with that. All right, now we're gonna install the driver's side intercooler hose. The way to tell which one is the driver's side is this one doesn't have any extra hoses attached to it, and there's nowhere to install the map sensor, so you know this is the driver's side. So let's do that now. All right, we're gonna start. Make sure you take the red cap out. Don't wanna leave that on. So you're gonna take the wider diameter end of the hose, go ahead and slide your clamp on, and then you're gonna take the other end and you're gonna work it through where the factory hoses went in. And you kind of have to twist and turn it a little bit. But just watch the path. It'll slide up in there. And then we'll attach it to the turbo in a minute. But for now, we're going to attach this end to the intercooler core. And then we'll tighten this clamp up once we get the other end attached to the turbo. All right, now back up top, you can see the hose here. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a smaller clamp, just place it on there, and then you're just gonna work it on to the turbo. Kind of pull it up as much as you can. And then now we're just gonna make sure the hoses are routed and not kinked or touching anything. All right, the hose is not kinked anywhere, so I'm ready to attach it to the core and tighten it up. So make sure it's pressed all the way against the core, and then take a 7mm socket to tighten the clamp. I just try to double check just to make sure it's straight. And then just make sure it's nice and tight. There we go. Now let's go tighten it on the turbo. All right, we're going to tighten this clamp to the turbo. Make sure it's as straight as you possibly get it. All right, there we go. All right, now it's time to install the passenger side intercooler hose. This one's a little trickier to install. First off, you want to make sure that you do not reinstall that boost pressure sensor until this is completely put in. Another thing is you're going to have to snake this thing through to get it to fit. Do not attach the end to the intercooler core until you've got this thing 100% snaked all the way through. So let's do that. Go ahead and hook this hose up to the other end of the core. Take that red cap, put it out of the way. Put your clamp on. Push it all the way on. And now we can go ahead and tighten up the clamps on this end and where the throttle body's at. All right, just take your 7mm again and tighten it down. Make sure the clamp is straight and that it's tight. All right, so you can see that this hose got attached to the throttle body. This is probably one of the most challenging parts of it. And you just gotta work it on to the throttle body till you get it on, and then we'll tighten up the clamps. All right, now we've got the passenger side intercooler hose completely installed. Make sure to use a 1/4 inch socket wrench with a 7mm socket to secure that final clamp around the throttle body. After you've done that, now we need to reinstall the boost pressure sensor, which if you remember looking at the hose, there's a very small hole with a clamp around it. This goes inside of that, and then you clamp it down. Make sure to also reconnect the connector to that boost pressure sensor after it's installed. All right, so now we've got the front mount intercooler kit 100% installed. So now let's get this car put back together. All right, so we need to reattach the bracket for the brake line. Just kind of line it up. You'll see this hooks into place, and then take your bolt. Use your fingers to get it started, and then secure it with a 12mm socket. Okay, once you get those two bolts in, make sure the bracket lines up here on the brake line so everything lines up and is secure. All right, next, reinstall this plastic shield. Just press it into the side first, and then you're gonna put a push pin back right here in this hole. Now go ahead and re-secure the front sway bar. You got those two nuts on the passenger side and then the same thing on the driver's side. All right, now you need to reinstall these plastic shields. There's one on the passenger side and then one on the driver's side. Just slide it back into place, like so. Find your holes and then put your bolts in. All right, now we need to put the bumper back on. Just line this up. And it should slide into place. Go. One side. And let's get the other side. It'll kind of rest. Now we can start putting the bolts and the push pins back in. Once you got the bumper back on, we're going to reconnect like the fog lights, put those back in, just line it up. And twist. You got the DRL, you want to reconnect that, snaps into place. And then finally, you want to reconnect your washer line, and that just snaps back into place. And you're going to do the same thing on the other side, minus there's not going to be a washer fluid line. All right, now we're going to put the metal shield back on. All right, now we need to reinstall the black splash shield. That's going to require the push pins, 10 and 8mm bolts. All right, now we're going to install the side splash shields. There's one on the passenger side and one on the driver's side. They require 3 of your 8mm bolts and then more of your push pins. Just line everything up and then start putting them in. All right, now go ahead and reinstall the inner fender liners. And they are just secured with a whole lot of push pins. All right, now we need to put the coolant reservoir back. Just take your two 10mm nuts to re-secure them. All right, now we need to reinstall the battery tray and then we'll put the battery back in. And go and put your bolts in. Now it's time to reinstall the intake. All right, with the intake reinstalled, if you remember that one hose that was coming off the passenger side intercooler hose, that one will now attach to the hose connected to the intake. Just press it on and then you can just kind of tuck it away. All right, now go ahead and put your wheels back on. video on how to install a Eurocompulsion Front Mount Intercooler kit on a Fiat 124 Spider. If you're interested in purchasing one of these kits for your Fiat 124 Spider, you can do so directly on our website at enginecustomsandperformance.com. If you like the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss any future install videos or awesome Abarth content. And until next time, I'm out.